Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of At the Table. My name is Rick Grantham. I'm a shareholder and director at Deal Leaders International. And with me today, I've got Taryn. Taryn Henkel is our senior financial analyst in the business, but I think much more than that, also plays a role of deal executive on certain projects. And we tend to, as we do with most of us, we do what we have to do when we have to do it. In this particular project, it was actually started a while back, in fact, before Taryn started. And I'll just go through a little bit of the timeline before I talk to exactly where Taryn took over as the deal executive on the project. This was interesting, and I'm going to let Taryn talk to the detail around a Section 42 dividend strip, which created a bit of a delay in the process. But basically, this client, LK Products, you all know the red canapers. I should have brought a pair to show off. The red canapers we all use in our braais. If you go down, particularly the braai aisle in a ShopRite, in the Checkers, you will find a lot of LK product. And yeah, they signed up with us in 2021, mid to late 21. And we initially went to market in early 2022. We had a lot of interest, but one of the problems was we had a lot of meetings with potential acquirers, but quite a lot of the acquirers were put off by the fact that actually they weren't ready to buy the business, because the business needed to wait this 18-month period before a transaction could take place. But it was an interesting experiment in bringing people in early and pre-selecting them, and then getting into the deal a little bit later. So I was around for those meetings back in 2022, so we're going back a long way. And then Taryn got involved early 2023 when we started going back to market. Maybe Taryn, you want to pick it up from there? I thought that open day that they held was an interesting event to use.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So we got involved early 2023, and by that time, the clock had run down on that 18-month period. And LK was hosting this event that was very much targeted to their customers and the salespeople, but they had rented out a warehouse and filled the warehouse with the entire product catalog. And it was an opportunity for people to see the full product range under one roof, which is quite rare because LK's normal model is to distribute only certain product categories depending on whether it's a hardware store or a retailer. So you would never actually get that opportunity to see the full catalog in one place. And what we did was we selected a handful of potential acquirers and invited them to this event where they could have the full LK experience. And really, it was just incredible to see the reaction to the products at the time. And I think it went a long way just to highlight like this brand has the potential for standalone retail stores and positioning in the market. So, yeah.
Yeah, I must say, I found it amazing. I took not only the guys who became the ultimate acquirer, but also probably the main challenger. And it just highlighted to me how you've got to make sure that the buyer really gets the business. And a lot of people who maybe were distributors or something, they understand the business, but definitely the buyers didn't really get the full range until they went to that event. So I think just in the world of selling businesses, you've got to really make sure that your acquirers know what they're buying. Otherwise, they're probably going to devalue somewhere along the line. And I think that was extremely powerful. Where did things go from there?
So that was early 2023. From there, we really ran the process in terms of just engaging with a handful of acquirers that showed interest. We shared the updated IM with them, and they had an opportunity again to meet with Simon and Johan, and then set a deadline in terms of when we wanted to receive offers, really just to create a little bit of urgency, and they knew they were not the only people in the process. So I think we received offers in August of 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was we got about one or two offers for this.
I think the main acquirer did the formal offer. We had the challenger to that. Actually, in the end, didn't make an offer formally. I got it through a conversation, and we gathered the information. And there's no doubt that the acquirer that did the deal was the better deal. I think the multiple was way ahead of what we were expecting. And I think also what was fascinating to me is that Johan, the major shareholder, was everyone he had spoken to that point said they wanted to keep him in the business as a shareholder. So no one was talking about a 100% deal. And yet that deal came out at 100% cash up front. How
Yeah,
often
and
how often have you seen a cash
it's
upfront 100% deal?
it's so rare. And I think this acquirer was one of the few that could make that happen. The seller really he wanted a full exit. He wanted to be involved in a consulting basis, helping with sort of strategies. And I think this is one of the few deals where we ticked pretty much all of his boxes because we had an acquirer that really understood the sort of founder-run businesses and this space. And they had the war chest to be able to do that and make it happen, and also the experience. So they didn't really need him in the business.
I must say, what was absolutely fascinating for me in that journey was the fact that Johan literally started making those red canapes in his father's garage, I think in 1989, before he finished school.
Yes.
So yeah, what an incredible story of growth from that point to a business that sold at a phenomenal multiple, a multiple that we very seldom see in the kind of manufacturing, industrial, and even less in the distribution space. So a really good deal. Maybe that the biggest catch in the deal, and I think this is the warning to people who are chasing 100%, was the warranties. Give us a bit of background to that, Taryn, because that was quite a journey.
The warranties. So in this case, there were tax warranties. There were also some environmental warranties, and the tax warranties were very much around the business did a Section 42 restructuring, where they basically set up a holding company structure and there was a loan account in the operating entities. And the way that they structured it, they were actually able to get away with paying very little tax on the transaction. So they really got a good deal at the end of the day. But it did mean that there were significant tax warranties attached to that. And then also being a manufacturing company, there's a lot of health and safety and licenses required to run a business of this size. So again, just giving the warranties that everything is in place and everything is, all the licenses are active and there won't be any risks from that side for the acquirer. So there was a big emphasis on the ESG, environmental health and safety in the DD as well.
Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest concern that the seller had. If you walked around the factory, so I hope Johan's not listening, it wasn't particularly tidy. It was a busy factory. It had a lot of that steel. They make a lot of braai grids, for example. The braai grids have to be dipped in acid and then dipped in something else. And so there are a lot of kind of nasty chemicals around. And I think, having to sign away quite big numbers on the environmental warranties was quite steep. But in the end, it happened. We finalized the offer basically end of 23, early 24, and the deal only concluded March 25. So that was a long journey. We sold this business to a large listed corporate in South Africa who does a lot of acquisitions, is very diversified, and that results in a long journey through the Competition Commission. How long was that? That must have been a good 4 or 5 months in Compcom.
Yes. Yeah, and it is classified as a large transaction. So I think also we didn't really benefit from the December break. So that also added some time to the time in Compcom.
And Taryn, tell us about, I think one of the things that made this work was the work that you did with Simon, the CFO or FD of the business. Just tell us about the financial side, because it wasn't that straightforward. It certainly wasn't a single entity. It was multiple entities and a lot of activity between stock and manufacturing and import. I think they import and distribute, import about 40% of what they sell and manufacture about 60. So quite complex financial play. How did that play out? And just tell us a bit about what made it work in the end.
Yeah, so Alke, there were 3 entities in the group, so requiring consolidation, eliminating intercompany balances, and also understanding what the margins are between the entities. Again, the acquirer spent quite a bit of time in DD to make sure that the right margins were in the right entities. And Simon, what he did really well is because he had been in the business for so long, they kept very clean, timely, monthly management accounts. And by the time it got to the full year period, there were very few adjustments between what was in his management accounts and what was in the financial statements, which also helped in terms of giving that confidence, because as we were going through the process, we were able to constantly track, okay, this is where we are compared to budget, and this is likely where we're going to end up. And he was also updating his forecasts. It really helped in the sense that the financial records were organized and up to date, and the documents to support it were available. They did reconciliations, and I spent a lot of time with him as well, unpacking the reasons for the reconciling items and understanding the movements. At the end of the day, this was just in the preparation phase, and as we were going towards receiving offers and analyzing offers, the due diligence process, we uploaded thousands of documents to that VDR. And it was a case of we had to know what was going on in each of those documents to be able to answer the questions. And I think without that preparation phase and working so closely with Simon, it would have been a much more challenging due diligence process, because what it meant was Simon could answer questions and I could answer questions, and we were just really close to the numbers.
Yeah, I think I also just recently heard of a business similar, much smaller, but similar business selling to the same acquirer. It's also a big listed acquirer. And they just never got to the offer that worked for them. But I think a lot of what worked here is that when they made their offer, they made it based on information they got from the data room and from the IM and so on. And it all stacked up throughout. So even a year later, everything was still stacking up back to that point. And I think it's major learning for me in that the numbers worked and the numbers held, and there weren't big surprises in them. Because another interesting factor here was the economy wasn't booming. A business like LK is big enough and distributed that doesn't have step changes in performance. It grows with the economy and a little bit better than the economy. But it's not like they were growing at 10, 15% a year. And yet still the offer was solid. And I think a lot of that was just because the information was so solid. The acquirer was really able to see what they could do with that business rather than having to hope for the best and not really see the numbers. And as soon as your numbers don't stack up, a whole lot of conservatism is built into the price. And so I think just that the number side of this process was phenomenal. Just maybe for those who are listening, one of the powers of this business was this, firstly, the mix between local manufacturer and importing product, very complementary products. But their distribution is phenomenal. I can't remember how many thousands of outlets they reached, but as you probably all know, you can go to Pofadder and you'll probably find some LK products, Brightongs. So the acquirer was buying into this incredible distribution network, but there's no ways they would do that if they couldn't really understand it and couldn't see where the numbers were. So the number side and the financial analysis and presentation of the business was really phenomenal. Any other points before we wrap up, Taryn, any particular memories of the journey that stand out for you?
Yeah, I think for me it was the acquirer. What made a big difference was the acquirer also they got it. They could immediately see the synergies. They could see how this would benefit their existing homeware brand. I think in this case, they had quite a few existing household brands, but it was inside of the home. So they had a bit of a gap at that point in time in the outside range. So yeah, LK was very complementary in that sense. And also just benefiting from operational efficiencies with LK's expertise combined with their homeware expertise. They really got the synergy. So for them, they still believed at the end of the day, even though the seller really got what he wanted and pretty much most of what he asked for, the buyer still got a really good deal because of the synergies that were brought to the table and really the clear growth strategy in this case.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that came through we had a sort of celebratory dinner when that must have been in April or so, March, April this year. And certainly came through that the fit was good, that the buyer was happy, but in the little time we spent with just us and the seller, it was just great to see a guy who had worked so hard to build something, being just so happy with it all, happy with how it happened, happy with that you could just see that pressure and stress from him because he had carried this burden for a long time. It was a burden. It's a complex business, it's a big business, possibly getting too big for him and what he could handle. And just to see that release of the stress and the release of the pressure in him was phenomenal. It really was. He was definitely enjoying his red wine and I think his regular T-bone steaks on the braai. That was Johan's farewell story that he told us about. Taryn, thanks very much for your time and thanks for listening and watching. And we'll have the next one ready for you soon.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks, everyone.